I was camping in the woods 4 hours north of where I lived earlier this spring. There was a small lake that I'd go to a lot. It was never crowded or even really known about, I don't think, so it made for a nice peaceful getaway every time I went. When I got there on the first day and set everything up, nobody else was there. The lake wasn't too big and was surrounded by a grassy beach with the woods around it, so I could see pretty much all around the lake. Not too long after I arrived, I saw a man come out of the woods on the other side and set up a tent. He looked like an average camper and was keeping to himself for the first little while. Before sundown, though, I saw him making his way around the lake and over toward my campsite. He had a friendly smile and introduced himself as William. He said he wasn't sure if I saw him set up camp or not, but he saw me across the lake and just wanted to say hi since we were both out in the middle of nowhere at a lake that nobody usually comes to. We talked for a while, and he was really cool actually. William was 26, which was around the same age as me, and we both liked this camping spot because of how secluded it was. After talking for 30 minutes, he went back to the other side of the lake as the sun was coming down. Not much else happened that night, but in the morning, we ended up talking and hanging out for most of the day. We sat on the beach, sharing stories and laughter as we enjoyed the tranquility of the lake. He shared a 6-pack of beers with me, and we talked about our lives, our dreams, and our fears. It was a rare moment of connection in the vastness of the wilderness. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the water, we packed up our things and headed back to our tents. I was feeling a sense of peace and contentment that I hadn't experienced in a long time. I had found a true friend in William, and I knew that this camping trip would be one that I would never forget. As it got later, though, I started getting ready to stomp out the fire and go to bed. When I saw William walking around the lake, his campfire had gone out a while ago, so I thought he was in his tent already sleeping. But apparently not. He walked up to my campfire, and right away, something was different about him. "Hey, everything good, man?" I said. He smiled and was suddenly back to how he was before, but he said he came over to ask if I wanted to see a cool spot he found that had a great view. I said it was kind of late to be going out, but he assured me that the view was great because it was dark out. The way he was hyping it up made me feel like I couldn't not see it. What would be the point in camping out in the woods if I just passed up the good views? I got up and followed him to the other side of the lake, then trailed behind him as he led us through the woods. There was no path or anything, so I pretty quickly knew that whatever spot this was, William had to have been there many times before to know the exact way without getting lost, especially out in the dark. We walked for maybe 15 minutes before William started slowing down. He pointed ahead and smiled like this was the view. But when I walked in front of him and looked out, there was a small structure. It was an old RV or camper that looked like it had been abandoned and succumbed to the elements for years. Moss grew all over it, and holes of rust covered the siding. I turned back to look at William, wondering what this was, but his face was now cold and empty. He looked like he was a different person. "William, what is this?" I asked. He didn't answer. Feeling a rush of fear, I started frantically looking around. And that's when I heard the rusty metal door swing open behind me. I only saw for a quick second as someone else came running out before I started sprinting away. I could hear both William and the other person following close behind, but I gave my every strength to keep going until I lost them. By then, I'd run so far into the woods that I had no idea where I was. I just kept walking and keeping my eyes on the trees until the sun came up. When the first rays of sunlight pierced through the dense canopy of trees, I emerged from the woods, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked around, disoriented and confused. I had no idea where I was or how to find my way back to the lake. A wave of panic washed over me as I realized that I was lost and alone in the wilderness. I tried to retrace my steps, but the dense undergrowth and the lack of any discernible path made it impossible. I wandered through the woods for hours, my stomach growling with hunger and my legs aching with fatigue. I was starting to fear the worst when I heard a faint sound in the distance. It was the sound of running water. I followed the sound, my hope renewed. After what felt like an eternity, I emerged from the woods and found myself standing on the banks of a small stream. I knelt down and took a drink from the cool, refreshing water, grateful for the respite. As I sat by the stream, catching my breath, I realized that I had no idea how long I had been lost. I checked my watch, but it had stopped working. I had no way of knowing how much time had passed. A wave of despair washed over me as I realized that I might never find my way back. Just as I was about to give up hope, I heard a faint sound in the distance. It was the sound of a car engine. I stood up and looked around, my eyes scanning the horizon. In the distance, I saw a small speck of light moving through the trees. I knew it was a car. I started running towards the light, my legs burning with exhaustion. I ran through the woods, ignoring the thorns and brambles that scratched at my skin. I just kept running, hoping that the car would stop before I collapsed from exhaustion. Finally, I reached the road and saw the car parked on the side. I hailed the driver, my voice hoarse from shouting. The driver stopped and got out of the car. It was a young man, probably in his early 20s. I explained to him that I was lost and needed help. The young man listened to my story with sympathy. He told me that he was on his way to a nearby town and would be happy to give me a ride. I thanked him profusely and climbed into the car. As we drove away, I looked back at the woods, feeling a sense of relief and gratitude. I had finally escaped from the wilderness, and I knew that I would never forget this experience. I was on a road trip from Portland to Chicago. It's nearly a 3-day drive, so I had some places booked to sleep at along the route. I didn't get too particular with what places I chose, but I went with Airbnb so I could at least enjoy the road trip a bit more rather than staying in a crowded hotel. My first Airbnb was in Wyoming, and the route through the state doesn't pass through any big cities really, so it was in a really small town. It was probably no bigger than 2 or 3 miles long. As I passed the border into Wyoming, it started snowing heavily, only dragging on the long day of driving. By the time I got into town, the roads were covered in snow, and the sun had already set. It was pretty dead though. I mean, I don't know much about small towns, but this seemed exactly how I thought it would be, especially in a low-population state like Wyoming. I was hoping there would be a McDonald's or something that I could get a quick dinner from, but it was very clear that there wasn't going to be. So I drove through the town and turned down the road to my Airbnb. It was a long driveway leading up to a small home in the middle of a field, with tall, snow-covered pine trees lined up in the front yard. I parked on the side and got out with my bag, then walked around to the front. I put in the code and got inside, closing the door behind me and turning on the lights. It was small, probably 500 square feet, with just a living room and bedroom. I took my shoes off and dropped my bag next to the bed, then sat on the couch. When I did, a thump came from the bedroom. I looked back at the doorway I had just come from. It was pretty loud, but I had no idea what it could have been. I got up and walked back, looking into the room and turning on the light. The room was small and sparsely furnished, with a bed, a dresser, and a small nightstand. The bed was neatly made, and the dresser was empty. I checked the nightstand, but there was nothing there either. The only other door in the room was a closet, which was closed. I went over to the closet and tugged on the door handle, but it didn't budge. It seemed like it was locked from the other side. At first, I was pretty weirded out that a bedroom closet would be kept shut, but then I thought it could have been a maintenance closet the owner was storing stuff in. There were no other places to put anything, so that was the final conclusion I came to. I went back to the living room and rested my eyes on the couch while thinking through my plan for the next day. After 15 minutes, I got back up and went over to the window, looking out to see if the snow was still coming down and if the roads were even going to be drivable tomorrow. It was eerily dark outside, with no lights from the town showing behind the tall pine trees, and it was still snowing heavily. I shut the blinds and turned back to the couch, but I saw a shadow move in the bedroom. It was slow and smooth, like the shadow of a door opening or closing. I started walking over, listening as I approached the doorway and looked inside the room. Everything was in place, and nothing looked to have caused the shadow I saw, but I knew I saw something moving there. I continued looking around until my eyes fell back on the closet. It was still closed, but something gave me an unsettling feeling about it. I stepped up and grabbed the handle, and it opened with ease. It wasn't locked anymore, but inside there wasn't anything. It was just a small and empty walk-in closet. I continued looking around until my eyes fell back on the closet. It was still closed, but something gave me an unsettling feeling about it. I stepped up and grabbed the handle, and it opened with ease. It wasn't locked anymore, but inside there wasn't anything. It was just a small and empty walk-in closet. Before I could fully process everything and try to put the pieces together, I heard someone behind me. When I turned around, a large man was standing in the doorway to the bathroom. He looked beaten and tired, having scratches and cuts all over his face. His eyes were sunken, and his face was pale. He seemed to be in a state of shock or exhaustion. As I stared at him, he didn't even seem to care. He stepped into the bedroom and knelt down, grabbing a dirty and worn duffel bag from under the bed. The man then stood back up and didn't even look at me as he slowly walked out of the room and out the front door. I ran up and saw him trailing through the snow until he was beyond the lights from the house. I tried to get the police involved, but after giving my description, they really only talked to the Airbnb host. After leaving town, I didn't get any more information. I think it's most likely that he was just using the place to sleep or something, but the way he looked makes me second guess that. I just can't even think of what could have happened if I went right to bed that night with the man hiding in the closet, just inches away from me. I was left alone in the Airbnb, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. What had happened to the man? Why was he so beaten and injured? Was he in danger? I tried to convince myself that he was probably just a homeless person looking for a place to sleep, but the more I thought about it, the more uneasy I became. I spent the rest of the night tossing and turning in bed, unable to sleep. The image of the man's face kept replaying in my mind. I was terrified and confused, and I didn't know what to do. I was alone in a strange town, and I had no idea who I could trust. The next morning, I packed my things and left the Airbnb. I drove away from the town, feeling a sense of relief and fear at the same time. I was safe, but I knew that I would never forget the experience. The memory of the man in the closet would haunt me for a long time.